Alright, thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Now we come to our main program, plenary session, who will be hosted by our moderator.
Please welcome Dr. Husni Hadiati, M.Hum.
Okay, good morning everyone. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. I'm Husni Hadiati and then I'm going to be the moderator for this plenary session, and then of the fourth Colalite, conference on the superhero in the age of transnationalism, held by the English Department of Jenderal Sudirman University. I'm very happy to be the moderator here with our outstanding speaker. For this plenary session, we will have 3 keynote speakers. The first is Prof. Aquarini, and then the second one is Bapak Muhammad Zain Sulaiman, and then the third one is Liam Berg. Before we start our discussion, I would like to inform you that each keynote speaker will have approximately 30 minutes for the presentation. And then after that, it is continued with question and answer for about 60 minutes. And for participants who want to address a question, please address your question, but follow the rule that is as provided by the committee. Mention your name, your institution, and also to whom the question is addressed to. Okay, without further ado, curriculum vitae of Prof. Aquarini, our first keynote speaker. Prof. Aquarini Priyatna. Okay, we start from the education. Pendidikan dari Sastra Inggris Fakultas Sastra Universitas Pajajaran, lulus pada tahun 1991. Kemudian untuk S2 beliau adalah pada Institute for Women Studies, MA in Feminist Culture, Theory and Practice, Lancaster University, United Kingdom, and also program studi kajian wanita, Pasca Sarjana Universitas Indonesia, lulus pada tahun 2003. Kemudian untuk program doktor beliau adalah pada Center for Women Studies and Gender Research, School of Political and Social Inquiry, Faculty of Arts, Monash University. And then the penghargaan dan hibah, saya bacakan yang paling akhir yang beliau terima ya. The newest grant she received, Sumitomo Foundation Research Grant, Local Wisdom and Women's Role in Preserving Natural Environment in Indonesia and Japan. Books ya. Beliau menulis banyak sekali buku ya. Ada beberapa yang perlu saya sampaikan. I think this is very interesting book for those who want to study more about gender. Gender dan konstruksi ibu bersama Lina Melianawati Rahayu dan Mega Subekti, Unpad Press pada tahun 2011. Serta New Forms of Celebrity, Autobiography and Femininity, Unpad Press 2019. Artikel terakhir yang beliau tulis itu ada pada tahun 2019, From Hot Mummies to Differently Able Mother, Diverse Portrayals of Mothering in Women, Journal of International Women's Studies, August 2019. Okay, without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Prof. Aquarini Priyatna.
Thank you very much, Dr. Husni. First of all, I wonder if my voice can be heard clearly. Is my
Yes, we
Okay.
can hear you very clearly.
So, okay. Thank you very much. So, first of all, thank you for the kind introduction, and I would like also to thank the organizer for having invited me to this very interesting, exciting conference, especially Ibu Ririn, who's been in contact with me for months, and we've been doing back and forth communication. And I would like also to thank Unsud for holding this conference. And thank you to the fellow panelists. It's an honor and I'm deeply humbled to share this panel with you because frankly speaking, I'm a newbie in superhero research, and I would like to thank the organizer for really compelling me to embrace these new things for me. As the slogan in Monash University where I study is the Ancora Imparo. I'm still learning, so I'm still learning. This is something. This conference would give me a room to share and to learn. I would like to learn more from other participants. So let me share my presentation. Uh, has it shown? Okay. The title of my presentation is Indonesian Female Superhero Forging the Feminine in the Masculine World. So I would like to start by saying female characters in the superhero genre are often portrayed to be subordinate and object, even victims. This presentation argues that while the emergence of female superheroes may potentially contribute to the more empowered portrayal of women, these superheroes are often depicted to amplify the masculine attributes, resorting to exclusion, elimination, and violence. Okay. I would like to look into several well-known Indonesian superheroes and finds that Indonesian female superheroes such as Sri Asih, Putri Bintang, Nina Gadis Rimba, while seemingly attempt to integrate Indonesian culture into their portrayal, often enough manifest not only masculine traits, but also the American values and culture. However, unlike other female Indonesian superheroes, Loh Ayu Manik Mas embrace, I would argue that this is what I'm going to present today. There is a new superhero, Luh Ayu Manik Mas, embrace feminists and integrate local Balinese cultures in her appearance and portrayal. And in this way, she not only Luh Ayu Manik Mas offers a potential Indonesian female superhero, she's offering a model for Indonesian superheroine. Let me start with a confession. I'm not much of a fan of a superhero genre. Superheroes comics were not even my childhood reading staple, though I vaguely remember having some in my childhood bookshelves. I remember reading some comics. My encounter, or in this case, my memory with superheroes, were mostly through movies. As a child, I watched Superman, but I focused more on Lois Lane than Superman. Later, I watched Batman, but I was in love with Catwoman. As I had become mother, I was dragged into the movies watching Spider-Man with my sons. Again, I failed to focus on Spider-Man. I found my attention was drawn to the girl characters. Perhaps the only superhero I can relate to is Bionic Woman, which I watched years ago. I am not into costume, and I do not get the idea of clothes-changing superheroes. There are too many questions that I cannot find the answers of. So what I like about Bionic Woman is that she does not have to change her clothes to become a superhero with a superpower. She seems like a down-to-earth woman, and her power does not mean muscle. Here I'm echoing Adrian Mishler. Bionic strong is not muscle. Bionic Woman, while strong, is lean and feminine, and to some extent radiates vulnerability. Strangely, I'm drawn to her because she's both strong and vulnerable. There is something peculiarly interesting to me about the combinations of strength and vulnerability, something that I can relate to. Of course, there's a problem in associating women with vulnerability. But culturally, women are associated with vulnerability, and media and literature contribute significantly to the perpetuation of such a notion. The media has insistently represented women as vulnerable, even as victims or lesser beings compared to men. As a whole, we are led as anything but vulnerable. To believe in women's vulnerability in a way that we have the inability to imagine women as anything but vulnerable and in need of protection, which eventually leads to the rampant occurrence and justification of violence against women at different levels, says Stabiel, 2009. My memory about superheroes is filled with women characters who are not necessarily described as triumphant or even categorized as categorically aspiring. I wondered why Lois Lane, as smart as she was portrayed, failed to recognize Superman as Clark Kent. It takes a long time for her to recognize him. I was happy to see the portrayal of Catwoman by Michelle Pfeiffer. The scene when she destroyed all the stages with her whip and exited the room with a powerful and kittenish meow lifted me up. Girl power. But then, of course, when Stacy was killed in a horrific accident, I began to feel devastated. Why are these girl characters pacified and victimized? Of course, there are other, like Lois Lane was originally not very passive, the way she was portrayed in the latest Superman portrayal. So the marginalized position, as Palmer contends, comic books have demonstrated a great capacity to reflect and interrelate with larger social and ideological questions over the entire history. Despite the demand for gender equality across different aspects of life, including in popular culture, such ideology engenders the signification of male characters and masculinity as superior to femininity, says Fleming and Alton and Barker. Implied in this perspective is the binary idea of gender construction that the female is the opposite of the male, and the feminine is the natural construction of what it means to be a woman. The masculine is the opposite of the feminine, and that what it means to be a man is to be whatever that is not feminine. In many cases, this means the perpetuity of hegemonic masculinities that normalize and naturalize men's aggression and violence. In turn, and I quote, according to Fleming, it celebrates the dominations of weaker individuals through power and violence, end of quote. As Connell further argues, hegemonic masculinity marginalizes women and any masculinities that do not entirely conform to the ideal normative masculinity. In other words, hegemonic masculinity defines what it means to be a man, and it is also an idea that a man must aspire to be. Scholars studying superheroes have identified the tendency for portraying women as victims in the superhero genre, known as fridging, according to Curtis and Cardo, 2018. These terms allude to the killing of Alexandra DeWitt, the girlfriend of Green Lantern, by Major Force. Kyle Rayner, Green Lantern, found the DeWitt remains stuffed in the refrigerator. The term women in refrigerator is coined by Simone Gale to refer to violence and disempowerment of women in the comic and superhero genre. Gale's website bearing the same name, Women in Refrigerator, documents depiction of female characters being inflicted with violence or the empowerment and disempowerment to make way to portray man's superiority. In other words, women have generally been taken for granted, marginalized, sidelined, and ousted. On a more positive note, Palmer also argues, 2008, that there has been a rise in female superheroes and a decline in the passive portrayal of women. And I think Wonder Woman from the very beginning by William Morrison has been designed to kind of embody this feminist aspiration. We have witnessed how Wonder Woman takes the center stage. Both the film and Gal Gadot, the actress who plays Wonder Woman, enjoyed the popularity and even euphoria of women's empowerment. However, female superheroes are not depicted the same way as males. Female superheroes are often described as physically disturbed and do not necessarily embrace their superpower, according to Stabiel, 2009. So as in many different genres, the issue of in gender representation concerns largely the portrayal of normative gender and sexual construction, the hierarchical and binary opposition of female and male, feminine and masculine, as well as the critical absence of alternative portrayal of gender and sexuality. Also crucial is that the superhero genre is still predominantly white and centered, according to to Brown 2005, Foster 2005, Prabasmoro, Budiono, and Muhtadin 2019. Therefore, non-male, non-white, and non-normative gender sexuality representations of superheroes are often practically pushed aside. The hard questions raised by Koka 2016 help structure this presentation. She writes, why the proportion of female superheroes, and I quote, why the proportion of female superheroes as compared to male ones hasn't really changed? Why they tend to be super sexualized? I have just found Wonder Woman portrayal comics and pictures in the internet. How they are really sexually sexualized, highly sexualized. So along with being super strong, and why most of them are white and heterosexual and upper middle class and able-bodied. Okay. So I would talk about how this situation then suggests that feminist discussion on superheroes substantially records the intertwining of gender, sexuality, embodiment, race, and even colonialization. We need to talk about all those things as intertwined, as interconnected, and so that this idea of a hero or even superhero needs to really consider those different elements. The question remains how women characters can and or should be depicted to contribute to the emerging social cultural landscape that crucially embodies feminist aspiration within the specific context for Indonesian landscape for us of the superhero genre. How is a superhero, a female superhero in Indonesian context should look like? How does it, what does it have to embody? Where do we stand? Like, what do we want these superheroes to represent? It is also important to note what Outen and Barker write, that the transformation of normative relations, of gender relation, requires the inclusion of characters who questions the assumption of a fixed gender binary. So we don't talk about men and women as totally opposite. We don't talk about masculinity and femininity as totally opposite. And I am kind of tired seeing hypersexualized superheroes. You know, I was wondering whether Wonder Woman, for example, would be as interesting, as attractive if, for example, she's heavy, she's big, she's overweight. What do we have now? Or there have been questions about making some superheroes gay, for example. How would a superhero would look like? Luckily, we have Black Panther, and I think some of you might talk about it, which I think is very interesting. So we need to really question those things and really think through about where do we want to go from here. So I would now talk about Indonesian female superheroes. And again, I would like to thank Ibu Ririn for really making me do this, because then I would have a chance to really study Indonesian female superheroes, although maybe in a very, not really going into depth. So I would really refer to what Bonef has written, and the book has been really comprehensive to me in talking about the development of Indonesian female superheroes. And I have found a lot of interesting things that he wrote. So when Indonesian superhero comics came into being, I think they unavoidably look at the American as a form of archetype, while at the same time disrupt its Americanness by accommodating and highlighting the local attributes. This is further illustrated by the emergence of national comic contextualized Indonesian politics. Among the most important heroes in comics, in post-independence comics, were women such as Melati Srikandi, according to Bonef, Srikandi Tanah Minah, Srikandi Kemerdekaan, Tuti Pahlawan Putri, according to Bonef. The comics show the significant role women play in Indonesian history, which can be considered a promising start for women's portrayal as subjects, something that even American comics at the time, although I would argue that Wonder Woman in its original version original version had this feminist aspiration, which has been revived by the later Wonder Woman. However, Indonesian comics portraying female superheroes also offer a more complex look into intertwining of race, culture, ethnicities, and gender. And this is something that I find it interesting that what Bonef has written, how there have been comics on Indonesian heroes, those are women who are activists and fought for independence. Now, before that, I would like to talk about how this, first of all, we have this American superheroes, and we have this Indonesian superheroes, and we have male superheroes, and we have female superheroes, and then we have these white superheroes, and then non-white superheroes. But let's talk about how is a superhero built on, what is it built upon. So I would talk about superhero as hybrid. So superhero hybridity, reconstructing gender and gender identity. I found these pictures interesting because this is Wonder Woman 2016, and there has been news and talks about Sri Asih, who is, or which is, an Indonesian superhero, is being made. Look at the costume; it's highly similar. You cannot say there is nothing dissimilar about that, because it's very similar. And so this is so the idea of hybrid is very interesting. So the history of Indonesian comics testify the nature of the development of comics. Comic characters and superheroes come and go, but it is essential to note that even the older superheroes do not simply fade away or disappear. They may be reborn and given new attributes, making superhero constantly hybrid in nature. That's according to Fingeroth 2014. Further, then Coca writes in 2016 that people of color, both female and male, only make 1 to 3% of the main characters in children's and adults book in 2010. In children's book, there are only 1 to 3% of people of color. That shows there's an issue there that needs to be tackled in this kind of genre. It shows that there is a great imbalance of cultural representations in the superhero genre. On the other hand, it also means there is a potential for emerging diverse and even local superhero characters. So we realize there is a gap there, but at the same time, a gap is asking to be filled. This is the work that we can do. This is the work of these creators, creative teams and agents to actually fill in the gap and give more representation of not only female representation, but also people of diverse race, non-white. And we also tackle other issues that could be more sensitive, such as the issue of gender and sexuality, for example. So Indonesian comics, again, according to Bonaf, has seen the flourishing local comic after its independence in 1945. The emergence of local comic had somehow denied the American dream sellers opportunity to take advantage of the vast Indonesian market. Bonaf 2008, page 10. As Bonaf notes, Indonesian comics can be traced back to Indonesian prehistory period. That's even when American comics expanded worldwide. Indonesian comic writers have often delved into the local culture and narratives to explore the themes and elaborate the media dramatization and imaging convention. Um, I I put this picture of Tarzan, appeared first in novel 1912 and in comics in 1929. And we have this Nina Gadis Rimba 1954, who basically look more or less like Tarzan, except that she is a female. Um, this is showing not only the intertwine of the comics in America, but in Indonesia. But at the same time, I wouldn't say it is a passive adaptation and or passive adoption, because obviously the comic also work on making it local to some extent. For example, if you want to talk about Superman, kind of being an archetype of a superhero, for example, then we have Wonder Woman with the same color, with the same kind of even power and gesture. And then we have in Indonesia, this is Putri Bintang in the left, and then we have Sri Asih on the right. Putri Bintang is more or less like Wonder Woman. There's no doubt about it. The work by R. Akosasi to work on Sri Asih is interesting because she's wearing kebaya, and but she's still wearing this tiara. To some extent, we still have this. But at the same time, she's wearing sandals, not shoes, which is very interesting. And I wonder how she can fly and fight with that. But also, Bonet says that Superman has can be seen in Flash Gordon. At the same time, he also Arya Siti Gahara has the kind of adaptation of Flash Gordon. So we talk about how superhero is being recycled to some extent. Okay, so according to Bonnet, this process of marrying the more predominant comic, mainly those from the US, featuring white male protagonists, to the more localized representation of superheroes who are not only males but also females, has contributed to the birth of Indonesian comics. Comic writers translated with the English text dialect into the panels. They also started to simply imitate American comics in the Indonesian context. Thus, among others, we have Sri Asih Putri Bintang as a translation and adaptation of Superman, according to Bonnet. Other American archetypes also got translated, such as I said, Siti Gahara and Nina Gadis Rimba. And Bonnet called this the imitation of American products, which I would also question. The blending of the West and East brings forth superheroes that carry varied cultural and social weight of what Bonnet labeled as national culture. Therefore, even when Sri Asih and the likes comics can be perceived as imitation, it does not imitate in a way that accepts the centrality of American comics. It mimics the American comics in a way that Ahmed argues as a project that questions the origin and originality of American comic. As Ahmed contends, and I would quote, in copying and hybridizing the colonizer, the colonized subject demonstrates the inauthenticity of the original as originary. The original itself is a copy, which is open to reiteration and hence displacement. Hybridization here traverses absolute distinction between identities, between the self and other, precisely by affirming a difference that undoes the binarism. So when we see Wonder Woman as the original, we kind of not see it as original because we have seen Superman, for example. So all these things, they copy each other. So there is, in a way, it will be a very difficult. What I mean to say is that Sarah Ahmed really questioned the notion of original and originary. So after all, Indonesian has a long history of pictorial narrative as displayed in the many stone temples scattered around Indonesia. Indonesian comics as pictorial narrative mimic and at the same time threatens the origin and the originality of American comics. Comics are both local and not local. It manifests both the self and the other. The identity of Indonesian comic and the character's identity portrayed in the comics can be perceived as hybrids as well. As Ahmed further elaborates, by miming the identity of another, identity itself becomes an object of exchange that resists the realms of the proper and the property. So we cannot really say now that Sri Asi is a copy of Superman or Wonder Woman, for example, because we have seen that it has transgressed the notion of original and originality. In thinking of superhero, hybridity must not be thought of strictly terms of how the cultural is seen as racial or national realms, but must also consider how gender provide a cultural context and how it gets translated into comics. As I have discussed, the hybrid forms of superheroes are also manifested in Indonesian female characters such as Sri Asi, Nina Gadis Rimba, Putri Bintang, and even the recent Luh Ayu Manikmas. All female superheroes shows the attempt to break away from American superheroes, but at the same time, the reference to the mainstream American comic means its limitation in fully engendering truly local characters. As Ahmed writes, sorry, the danger of the hybrid of the loss of clearly demarked identities may be read in terms of policing and surveillance, while hybridity in its travels undermine authorization and property. It nevertheless can become the condition of its possibility. Thus, this is what I will delve further by looking into Indonesian comic and focusing on female superheroes. I would see possibilities in transgressing this, in going around this policing and surveillance. I will look at how this character display hybridity that transgress the border of local and global, the West and the East, but at the same time still display the established attributes and reference to American superhero comics. This is Indonesian, among others, yeah. Sri Asi, Putri Bintang, Nina Gadis Rimba Santini, and we have Luh Ayu Manikmas. Okay. Okay. So in his groundbreaking work, Bonef writes how Indonesian comic, especially in its early development, relied heavily on American comics, including its portrayal of female superheroes. Sri Asri, Putri Bintang, and Santini, for example, clearly resemble and refer to Wonder Woman. Nina Gadis Rimba is a local and female variation of Tarzan. This present here will not thoroughly discuss the body of Indonesian comics. I will merely discuss selected issue of Sri Asi, Putri Bintang, Santini, and Nina Gadis Rimba to point out my argument that these characters are hybrids in terms of its cultural as well as gender attribution. After all, should we consider superhero genre to be a global culture? It will be still, it is the ultimate implication is that whatever globalized culture is emerging, it will not bear the stamp of any particular cultural, geographical, or national identity. It will be essentially hybrid. So I'm using female superheroes in this presentation. So superheroines or female superheroes. So rethinking femininity in Indonesian comics. I'm using female superheroes in this article as neutral term to refer to superheroes that are female. However, in relation to these female superheroes attributes, it is necessary to consider the term superheroine. According to Coogan 2018, superheroine is a different genre altogether from the superhero genre. Coogan writes that superheroine can be traced to feminist utopian novels whose heroine integrates the rise of integration rather than the rise of order displayed by the superhero genre. In that, superheroine resorts to love, collaboration, companionship, and mentorship to solve problems rather than diminishing the characters that create this order. The main attribute of superhero is their power, and in general, power is attributed to men. No wonder why superheroes are predominantly male. They show masculine traits. American superheroes, after all, are predominantly white, male, and middle class. Indonesian female superheroes pose an intriguing side for the discussion regarding the traversing of culture and gender. For example, Sri Asi has been defined as the copycat of Wonder Woman, according to Bonev. But to say that Sri Asi is a mere copycat would disregard the fact that Sri Asi has a cultural weight of her own. Within the specific context of Indonesian culture, to have a female superhero is to examine our conception of hero itself. So I've not been able to research on the comprehensive body of Indonesian comics. So this is will be I would elaborate further on superheroines and female superhero in a more general term, perhaps. Perhaps the oldest Indonesian female superhero is Sri Asih, 1954. She has a superpower that is comparable to any, I'm sorry, the time is running up, to any male superheroes, most notably Superman. She can fly across the globe, she can fight and has no hesitation to resort to violence when fighting the criminals. She has soul eyes, she has this superpower. Her being superwoman is only manifest in her being a biological woman, and the only marker of her cultural identity lies in her costume. In other words, as is just like male superhero, she follows the rise of order in the way she goes, and her embodiment refers to that of male to some extent. She aims for restoration of order. It seeks in a way to diminish, not integrate. This is what interesting is some researchers look, they are fighting Putri Bintang, they fight Herd and Square, yeah. Let me just be, but there is this issue how this rights of order is carried out, is that after all this chaos is settled, this superhero would just walk away by herself, just like Superman ending, just like Batman, they would just walk and enjoy having saved the world. I would be very quick. I know this is 30 minutes. So this is a kind of mimicking the superhero, the male superhero, which is a very normative, like Coogan says, the normative male superheroes, the two characters also end up riding off into the sunset alone. This is like how Superman riding off to the sunset alone. The Batman would just look at that, and all these women also. Okay, let me just be very quick. I'm so sorry, this time is running up. Oops, sorry. Sorry, I don't know why. Okay, so different is Look Hayumanik Mas. I would just very quickly say Look Hayumanik Mas is aiming for the rise of integration. She's doing it with the love, and she integrate other people. There is a problem, she solved it, but she integrate other people. She talked to people who create order. She asked other people, her friends, to help her solve the problem. This is when she helped taking care of the dirty river, and this about the library. And this is something that Wonder Woman has also embraced. When it's done, she enjoys it in a kind of with other people. This is I am you, I am with you, I am for you, and I'm with you, I'm there, not just walking alone by herself. So I would just wrap up this superheroines conclusion. Gender is still a prevalent issue in the superhero genre. Women's position in the genre has long been relegated in the position of victims of object. The birth of female superhero contributes to a promising beginning of equality in men and women's portrayal. However, not all female superheroes contribute significantly to the re-evaluation of the perceived gender traits and attribution. In Sri Asih Pripinda Dinagarisima, for example, the superheroes are described to exert the masculine power and masculine approach to problem solving, exclusion, elimination, and violence. In Coogan's perspective, the three characters fall into the category of female superheroes, namely superheroes that are female. Alternatively, Luh Ayu Manikmas provides a role of a strong girl who can contribute significantly to solve problems, not merely by diminishing by the people who create it, but also embracing people to solve the problem collectively. Luh Ayu Manikmas offers feminine values as strength, no less important than the physical strength that she's also capable of. In Coogan's term, Luh Ayu Manikmas is not just a female hero, she is a superheroine. Superheroines are the future of feminine superheroes who help disrupt the notion of what it means to be a superhero and what it means to be feminine. Thank you very much.
Was a very insightful perspective of what superheroine is. Yeah, the notion of being a superhero at the same time also being feminine. Thank you, Prof. Okay, the next.